Alright, so from the examples and my commentary on these examples while I was testing all of these things, you gotta take into considerations those were the first times I was testing it and my first impressions and my impressions of actually working with it. So this was captured over a course of several weeks. I was testing it in, out, and getting to use to this new technology and trying to see what are the things to kind of keep in mind. And later on, one of the things popped out, which was obviously like, yes, the duh moment, but I think it needed to be kind of measured out, which was how good is this panel at capturing light, and what kind of performance you may expect from a panel like this in your own work environment. Now, I racked my head around how to kind of figure that out so that it's easy and that people can do it on their own, so that you can definitely check it out and test out and know what to expect if you are considering a panel like this in your own lighting conditions. So in order to perform this test, all you need is any kind of modern smartphone. You know how a smartphone, when it detects that you're in a brighter condition or a darker condition, it does auto brightness? Well, that means that if your phone has that, then you can perform this test. You just download any app that you want, which is a light lux measurer. So we're talking about LUX, lux units of light intensity that's in the environment. And all you need to do is fire up that app and place the phone head up. Well, you will see where that sensor is by, you know, kind of tapping, obscuring it, and see where it is, so that your screen starts going brighter or darker. And once you figure that out, in 99% of the cases, on the front of the phone, on the top, you just place the phone there and take the measurement of how much lux your environment has. Right? So that is number one thing that you need to kind of do. And that was number one thing that I did. So I did a test in very dark conditions. So basically this is a dark room. This is a properly dark room, and because it's small, it has just one window, and I have these black covers all around, which were all intentionally placed so that I can reduce reflectivity and reduce light bounciness to reduce the glare of my screens. Now, this is as unfriendly of an environment that you can possibly have for a reflective LCD bar a completely dark room that doesn't even have a window. So that being in mind, when I darken things out and like just use my regular lighting conditions, the lighting conditions for this room are 80 lux, which is super low. Then I would have an option of pulling up the shade here and allowing the natural light to come out, natural daylight, not super sunny, normal kind of weather. That was a room measurement of 660 lux. And then I would actually combine the open window and the overhead lights, which are not that strong, but they are there. And then it's combined, I would have 750 lux. So those are my three environment conditions that I had. And what I did then was use this same one to basically put it in front of a screen around the white. So I would put up a white image, and then I would put it at an angle, not like this, so that I'm not capturing a shadow, because you can see there's a shadow there. But if I put it like this, then my light is going to be measuring what's reflected up here, not the shadow itself. So if I put it like this and then measure the white, and then I would measure it across the whole screen like this, and capture a couple of key measurements there, make an average, and see an average value under these conditions, because it is a 32-inch screen, so it's a large surface, and you will have lighter, darker places, things like that. So I wanted to average them out. So this is what I did actually for the SVD panel. Then I did that for the e-ink white, and I also did that on a piece of printing paper white. And please keep in mind that the printing paper is the brightest thing that you will find. It's far brighter than books or anything like that. And if you need to kind of verify that, we'll just grab a piece of printing paper and compare, so you will see. I have three lighting conditions, and I'm comparing the reflected white color on the SVD on the e-ink and from the paper itself. And here are the values that I got. In the best lit conditions, so 750 lux, both window and the overhead lights, the paper was reflecting 402 lux, the e-ink was 211 lux, and SVD was at 152 lux. As you can see, it looks like that, the comparison, and it's perfectly usable, but definitely by a significant margin, reflective LCD is the darkest one there. Now, with the natural light only, so 660 lux ambient lighting conditions, paper was reflecting 270 lux, e-ink was at 158 lux, and the reflective LCD was at 103 lux. So still the same kind of relationship, but you can see how much that affected the paper. The paper is like drastically dropping down, and SVD is trying to, or reflective LCD is trying to kind of keep its thing. But e-ink is still brighter than a reflective LCD panel under the same conditions. Up until the point where I get to the darkest one, where the things actually change. So at 80 lux, when everything is down and I just have bouncing light from dark conditions, the paper was actually luminescent, and because it is thin and it does capture light, so it was glowing more than the ambient light was, and it actually reflected 124. Now, if it was a thicker piece of paper or a book, that would be drastically darker, but in this case it wasn't. However, the interesting part here is the difference between the e-ink and the reflective LCD. Under these conditions, reflective LCD was actually capturing more light and was able to be brighter because it is reflecting. So it was doing 36 lux as opposed to e-ink, which was very, very dark at the 31 lux. Now, that might not seem like a big difference, but when you're talking about such a dark condition, then every little bit counts, and it was an interesting thing to see how it changed. Those are the values, but what's important is the reflectivity ratios. And in super bright conditions, artificial and natural light combined, paper was reflecting 53.6% of the light available, e-ink 28.13%, and SVD, or the RLCD, was at 20.27%. In just the natural light condition, 660 lux, paper ratio was at 40.9%, e-ink was at 23.94%, and reflective LCD was down to 15.61%. And finally, at very dark conditions, we can actually see how more effective the reflective LCD technology is when compared to the e-ink. Of course, paper was crazy because it was starting to glow at 155% because of its thinness, and that's what it's supposed to do. But the two panels that are important here, reflective LCD, or the SVD, was at 45% of capturing and reflecting the light, and the e-ink was able to reflect only 38.75%, which is a difference that you can actually see under the dark conditions like that. But that being said, both of the devices under those conditions were exceedingly dark and not something that I can comfortably use. However, if we go back to 660 lux or 150 lux, everything basically around 100 lux and above was more than enough for me to comfortably use the reflective LCD panel or the e-ink panel, so to speak. So that's something that you can kind of think about when you're planning your space. This is something that you can use as a guideline. You just place the phone with the light meter somewhere in front where your screen would be, and do like a measurement left to right on the bottom here, and then see what your average value might be. And then you can consult this chart and actually consult the images that I've shown to know how it compares to different things, so that you know what you can expect with the reflective LCD technology in your conditions. And also, that's something that can be helpful, because then you can go around the room and see, hey, if you have the room to kind of play and rearrange something, because that's technically what you need to do, is you gotta rethink your workspace when you're using a reflective LCD technology, and that's the best approach. And if you do that, then you definitely want to do light measurements and figure out where the best place would be for a reflective LCD panel in your workplace. So obviously something that we absolutely have to talk about, because this is an indoor computer monitor. Yes, outdoors it is unparalleled. There is absolutely nothing out there that can even come close, let alone compare So there's no comparison with any of the technologies out there. The reflective LCD is in a category of its own. And if you are talking about a space that is covered in windows and really, really rich in sunlight and daylight, it doesn't have to be sunlight, just natural daylight, then this technology and this panel is, pardon the pun, literally going to shine. However, this is an indoor computer monitor, and in indoors conditions, if you don't have a rich daylight environment and you have like this little hovel here, just one little window, and it's also not able to bounce around because I have lots of black stuff around to kind of absorb in less than ideal conditions, then you have to take that into consideration, because there will be areas and there will be conditions where the monitor is borderline not possible to use because it's simply too dark. So then you need to resort to actually adding additional lamps and things like that to get that light enough for it to start working properly so that you can normally use it. It's completely dependent on your lighting conditions, which is something to be expected because it's a reflective LCD, but it is a huge difference and a huge difference in thinking and approaching in device like this, a monitor, that we've ever had. So it's something that, even though it's a dull moment, it is something that has to be mentioned. There's no front light, there's no backlight, it entirely relies on your environment lighting, and it's up to you to measure and compare and try to figure out, can I use this or not? And that's why I did the white color reflectivity lux test, so that you guys can actually have some measurable things and know what to kind of expect. Another thing that was also asked, and I think it's a really important one, is the color performance. And the color, does the color change depending on the light conditions? Yes, absolutely it does. So the richness of the color, the contrast of the color, the brightness of the color, all of it changes depending on that light. So if you have inconsistent lighting, so you have a blue light source on top and you have a yellow light source on the bottom, or the other way around, your white pixels or your white sheet is going to be a gradient from yellow to blue or from blue to yellow, depending on what your light sources are. So color uniformity is not something that you can count on unless you have perfect light source uniformity environment for that screen. That being said, it's not impossible, but you have to oversaturate the reflectivity at some point. There's a certain threshold, I couldn't find it where exactly it is, but let's say 1000 nits might be a threshold. Over that point, then the differences don't matter anymore. White pixels are white, colors are properly colored in every corner on the screen, and the contrast is excellent, the colors are excellent, and the consistency is excellent. Everything is excellent. What I'm talking about here is the sensitivity of the panel and the technology when you are below that optimal threshold, which is something that in a lot of indoor environments you will be in, right? So that's something that's a very important consideration, but you have to understand under which conditions. This is not like always. Nope. Imagine a threshold. Above it, perfect, absolutely outstanding performance, etc., etc. Below it, there's a myriad of considerations that you have to take into account, and that's why I'm talking about them, so that you are aware of these. The viewing angle is actually really, really good. It doesn't fade at any point, but at that point you do have a problem with the reflectivity, because it's a very reflexive panel, and that's something that I think they have to use in order to allow as much light to go in, because because it has to do with refraction. So when you have a ray of light hitting a surface, under the angle that it hits the surface, some of it will reflect, and some of it will refract into the through the surface into the panel and being reflected back out. So that's basically the panel capturing the surface. Now, the whole point of a true matte glass or any kind of diffuse surface is that a ray that you don't have a perfectly smooth surface, so the ray of light that hits it disperses itself into different angles. But it also means that the reflectivity of that will be diffuse or dispersed, which means, and I didn't ask them, but from the physics alone, more matte of a panel there is, less of it will be captured. So there's that kind of trade-off. And that is something that was bothering me in suboptimal conditions. The reflectivity of the panel was a problem here and there, but same as everything else, as soon as you ramp up the environment light conditions, that problem goes away. And here on the other hand, you don't have a problem because there are sharp reflections. You don't have a problem of a glare. You do get a sharp reflection here and there or there of the light, but you don't get an overall glare that you normally get on other panels. So even there, it's a very specific and strange situation, but I was able to figure out and find an angle that actually worked. But then again, as soon as the night would go down and I would rely mainly on the room lights, then I would struggle with some of the reflections here and there. But as soon as you get it outside, then there's no problem. So that's something to keep in mind for sure. And here are a couple of fixed exposure examples under different lighting conditions so that you can see how it is affected by light and how it performs. So the light sensitivity and performance of the 32-inch SVD reflective LCD panel is fairly unique and a very important thing to understand. And this is the thing that took so much time for me to test it in so many different conditions and to try and understand it so that I can present a good breakdown of the new technology for you guys to know if this is something that you can use, that you want to use, should use, etc., etc. All of the things that I've seen make perfect sense, but there are very serious limitations that you have to be aware of. And I would recommend that you look at that chart of the light conditions, and then you do measurements, and then you test out your environment so that you can actually see what kind of environment can you provide for the reflective LCD panel if you are considering it, so that you know what kind of performance you can have. As far as I'm concerned, anything 750 lux and above is really good. Ideal examples are 1000 lux and above. In those conditions, then everything is fine and I never had any issues. But when you actually start dropping below those 1000 lux, or let's say 750 lux, that's also kind of borderline okay, but you do get it like that. So anything below 1000 is something that is going to allow one of these limitations to rear its head, be it a reflection, color inconsistency, contrast inconsistency, white inconsistency. Any of these things is something that you will have to account for, and if it's something that's bothering you and it's something that you rely upon heavily, then you have to keep it in mind. But overall, I was actually really impressed by how much that panel is able to capture. I did not expect it to be able to perform at all in this room, because this is a genuinely dark room, and in dark conditions I can't use a normal e-ink screen, and even for writing on paper I have to turn on the light and things like that. So I expected it to be completely unusable in these conditions, but it was far from it. You just fiddle around with the angle, find the best place, and it was actually usable. However, in these conditions, I did struggle with reflections. I didn't mind the colors because I didn't work any color sensitive material with it, but the reflections from a situation here and there in suboptimal conditions, I did struggle with. But overall, I am absolutely blown away by the performance of this one. And as soon as you move it out of really difficult conditions, which is this room here, and you put it into something where there's some light at least, then the screen is nothing but impressive. It's just really just blowing my mind how good it is and how different it is, because it becomes a part of that environment. And I preferred it to any situation: games, working, typing, reading. I preferred it to an e-ink. I preferred it to the regular LCD. So once I started using it and once I started figuring it out and how it actually works, all of the negatives of the layout, of the limited connectivity, short power cable, all of that kind of stuff just didn't matter that much anymore, because this huge thin piece of metal and glass thing in front of me was offering me something that I've never seen and experienced before, and it was borderline magical, because if the conditions are right, it's mind-blowing. If the conditions are not right and are subpar, you will be pissed off by it, and in some situations you might not be able to use it, so you have to be careful with that. Now, the compatibility of the screen was great. I didn't run into any issues, but then again, it only has an HDMI, so anything that was able to pop out the signal into an HDMI worked, even with SCART converters. So I tried I tried everything, and then I tried Super Nintendo, I tried Super Nintendo Mini, I tried my laptop, I tried my desktop, I tried my older computer as well. Everything just worked fine. One thing I did notice was that if I left the scaling mode of this panel on auto, there are scaling issues, so it didn't really kind of work. So 1:1, of course, you know, smaller image there, but the automatic didn't work properly, and the 16:9, and it was just kind of weird. So you had to find the exact option that would scale properly and not outside of the borders, and I believe it was just scan. Alright, so now it's time for the conclusion. What is the SVD 32-inch reflective LCD monitor like? And as usual, we're going to start with the cons. Well, the first con, and the most obvious con, the kind of duh con, is that because it's a reflective LCD panel, it is entirely dependent on the environment lighting that you can provide and the lighting conditions that you can provide this monitor to work under. So this is and can be somewhat prohibitive depending on what kind of environment you are in. Another con is the reflectivity of the front panel here. Now I understand that they probably have to allow a high transmission, light transmission type of a factor here, so that the monitor is able to capture and reflect back as much light as possible, but the reflections are an issue if you are in suboptimal lighting conditions. So this con is only there if you are in subpar lighting conditions. Then the reflections can become a bother in certain certain angles and certain circumstances, but if you do have optimal conditions and there is enough light, then the light that's reflected to you is actually way stronger than the reflections, and the reflections actually don't even exist. If you remember when I showed the example of the sun itself, how it reflects on the display itself, it's actually not something that's bothersome even at all when compared to the other matte displays when they are outdoors, because then you have this huge glare because the sun is diffused all over the whole thing, and then just whole thing glares. This one doesn't diffuse, it's a sharp reflection, but you don't actually get to have a problem with it because the image, the strength, the intensity of the image that's reflected back is overcoming the other reflections there. So in optimal conditions, not a problem. In suboptimal conditions, definitely something to keep in mind. The size of 32-inch and it being limited to just a desktop monitor only because it doesn't have a dedicated stand, height adjustable stand, or is VESA compatible, which is another con. It is not VESA compatible. So the size itself can and will be a con for some, because at 32 inches it does require a lot of desk real estate, which is something to definitely keep in mind. Now, even as it is 32 inch, it's incredibly thin, it's incredibly light, and those are all good things, but it's still a 32-inch screen. Another con for some will be that it's only 1080p. Now, why do I say only when it is definitely 1080p? Well, because this is not your standard LCD panel. As you've seen in the microscopic images when I've tested an IPS panel, OLED panel, and this one here, reflective LCD, there's a fundamental difference, which is that in traditional displays, each pixel consists out of several well-defined rectangular or certain shaped light sources, RGB light sources, whether it's an OLED or an LED or an LCD screen. Now, that means that the pixelization of the image will be very strong and the edges will be very sharp. This panel, as you've seen before, it has like a rainbow kind of a thing per pixel, and that reflects in the image that you see, where you get this almost organic, natural looking anti-aliasing filtering that's going on that doesn't actually make it blurry, doesn't affect the contrast, doesn't make it blurry, doesn't make it less sharp or anything like that, but it simply softens out the edges, which is something that actually makes it incredibly pleasant to look at. And once I saw that difference, that's something that made sense, that why I prefer the games or anything on this screen. In addition to everything else, there's also this type of thing to consider. But if you rely on 4K or something and you need physically screen real estate, so you need the physical amount of pixels for your work, then that is definitely a con to think about. But please do keep in mind that 1080p on a reflective LCD is not the same as 1080p on an equal-sized LCD or an OLED display. By no means, they are actually quite different. The image quality, I prefer how it is on the RLCD. Placement, ergonomics, and how the control buttons are placed and how they're supposed to be used, and the doubling of the power button and all of these kind of things, that's most definitely a con, because it's simply, it can be done better. No audio pass-through or any kind of audio functionality at all is yet another con. The scaling doesn't function as it should. The auto scaling mainly doesn't function as it should, and this would be an easy fix if you would just have a firmware update if the monitor had a USB functionality, but it doesn't, and that's yet another con. It doesn't have any USB data connectivity with the computer, so there's no way to update it. There's no USB hub or anything like that, so yeah, definitely cons. It only has one HDMI slot. It doesn't have mini DP, doesn't have DP, doesn't have USB-C. And yes, while I do understand that purchasing licenses for using these ports is something that's expensive, and when you don't know how the product will be received, sold, or anything like that, if you already have an HDMI, there was absolutely no reason not to include at least two HDMI slots so that you can use two different devices on a single 32-inch panel, which is something that quite a lot of users actually would like to have. Short power cable maybe sounds like a small con, but for me that was a very real con, because there's absolutely no reason to have it that short, especially for a panel like this, and it was something that I was running into as an issue pretty much every time I was testing it. The cable was simply too short in most of the circumstances. There are no anti-slid pads on the bottom of the device. Not a big deal, but it is something that's present, and for that price range and a premium device, that's something that absolutely has to be taken into account. So especially when a device is so lovely designed and built, then definitely, you know, things like that do kind of tend to stick out. And also the price and the availability. The availability is now better, but the price actually jumped from, initially the price was $15.49, which was really high, and now it has jumped to $17.99 US, but currently they do have a discount of 7%, I believe, and now it's at $16.79 US. So yeah, now if you go to the SVD website, you will see that the price of the monitor is now up to $17.99, and it is on sale for $16.79, and originally it was $15.49. So I reached out to SVD to ask what this is about and if they can actually provide an explanation, and this is what they said. The reasons for this are: NVIDIA aggressively priced the launch, the first launch of monitors in an effort to get product to market and make sure the support was actually there. Sometimes people say they will buy but don't. Perfectly understandable. We also wanted to reward the first adopters who took the risk in believing in us and in our monitor. Okay, so point number 2, we made necessary changes so that we can process orders 24/7 and have no additional interruptions or out of stock problems, which is something that basically everybody is now suffering from these issues. So this is actually quite a big thing. Over time, these changes will result in lower lead times and greater availability worldwide. So that also, to me at least, makes sense. Point number 3, after receiving feedback, it is clear that some changes need to be made to the current design as well as options for future developments. In order to allocate capital to those efforts, it reduced our ability to keep prices lower than they should have been. It may not be something an individual consumer wants to hear, but it is a sign of a healthy product line, which is most encouraging overall. I actually really think it's a breath of fresh air to hear somebody talk about these things so openly and honestly. It's not just like I don't know, the COVID and this and that, and it's all bad, and I don't know. And instead, they actually just kind of tell you exactly how these things are. And to me, this makes perfect sense. So, and yeah, they wanted to wrap it up in a single quote, and that would be, to continue meeting the demand for this incredible product and ensure that everyone can have access to a monitor of their own, we have restructured our supply chain to support greater production quantities. While these improvements come at a cost a little sooner than anticipated, it helps ensure the continuation and further development of this product line for the indefinite future. So there you go. That is the explanation of the price change. Like it or not, you gotta respect the honesty and openness regarding how they approached this whole thing. Either way you put it, the price is most definitely a con, and it's something that's going to be a deal breaker for people who don't understand what the technology is or are simply not interested in. And that's okay as far as I'm considered. That's perfectly fine, because if you are put off by the technology itself and the limitations that are there because of as far as the reflective LCD panel goes, and the price itself, then yeah, of course, this is not a product for you, nor should it cater to everyone. That is something that I actually really appreciate about this product, and I do understand what SVD has to do, because please keep in mind this, yes, while the price is super high, this is not a type of a panel that they can just go to whoever the supplier in China is and say, I want that panel, I want to put it in that house, and I'm going to stamp my logo on it, as traditional displays are actually made. So this is not the case. This is their own display panel, their own everything from scratch, and that stuff is going to cost a lot. And definitely it costs a lot, but guess what? If you wanted to buy an alternative to this, what is the closest alternative? What is the closest comparison? There is none. There are no other products out there at all that can do what this panel can do. So we are in a situation where how much does a reflective LCD panel cost? This much. There's no other reference point. Bottom line is, reflective LCD panels cost a lot, and that's pretty much the way it is. However, it is a high price point, and some people will consider it a con, and most definitely objectively is a thing that you have to take into consideration. Personally, I don't think it's a con, it's just something that you absolutely have to be aware of, and it forces the user to do due diligence so that they can do proper research, properly inform themselves about whether or not this product is for me or not, because if you're going to invest that amount of money, you better do your research good. So hence the purpose of this video as well. All right, now on to the pros of the SVD 32-inch reflective LCD panel. Really hard to say. It has absolutely extraordinary outdoor performance that nothing can be compared to. Nothing comes possibly close to what this display can do when you give it enough light. It's absolutely mind-blowing. It makes it genuinely possible to work outside with ease and absolute pleasure, which opens up the possibilities of having an outdoor office on a terrace, on a porch, or obviously not in wet conditions, so that's maybe you would need some kind of roofing of some sort to protect it, because it is not waterproof. You have to keep that in mind. But it doesn't have to be outdoor at all. It can be extremely comfortably used in a really well-lit room or an office as well. And when we're talking about comfort levels, it's extremely natural and comfortable to use over prolonged periods of time. And especially if you compare it to the traditional displays, the difference is immediate and it is huge, because it doesn't have a blue light, it doesn't glow at you, it doesn't fight the natural light, it becomes a part of the environment, and most importantly, it does not flicker. And all of those things, when you combine them and add them, it simply provides for the most comfortable viewing experience if you have the lighting conditions above a certain threshold. That is the major thing that you absolutely have to keep in mind. More up from the minimum threshold of light you are on this display, more comfortable and enjoyable it will be to use. Further away and further below you are that threshold, more problems will start to arise that we talked about in the cons, such as reflectivity or color inconsistency and things like that. So it's something that you have to keep in mind, and it's a different type of a product. So, but if you do meet and allow it to have minimum requirements, something that I think should be contained, like how much lux is recommended and what's the minimum for this device to work. So I think that would be a helpful thing to add for people to understand whether or not they can use this device. But let's say if you do meet the minimum requirements, then there's nothing that can be compared to this. And all of this is yet another pro, which is really real world, genuine, immediately felt health aspects, that this is a healthier piece of technology to use for a prolonged period of use. Has a gorgeous design and a beautiful build quality and materials that are used. It's just something that I could not get enough of. You know, just how thin and how pretty and how good it feels to interact with it, just to kind of touch it and move it and swivel it and things like that. Every time you approach it and you interact with it physically, it feels good and it feels like a very premium and extremely modern device. So outstanding build quality and the design. For a 32-inch monitor, this is an extremely lightweight monitor, and it also has extremely low power consumption. 32-inch competitors at 300 or 600 nits are probably going to pull around 60 watts or more, sometimes even 120, 180 watts if you're going into ridiculous nits category. But this one actually pulls just around 5-6 watts, so you do have a very, very, very real power saving features here as well, which is both economic and ecological consideration to keep in mind. So how to wrap up the SVD 32-inch reflective LCD computer monitor? Well, the thing to keep in mind is that, for me at least, the reflective LCD monitor that we have here is a revolutionary step, not just an evolutionary step. Because usually what we have in LCD, LED, OLED panels, they are all evolutionary kind of step ups. On e-ink panels as well, you had black and white panels, now you have color panels, all utilizing same type of thing, and they're evolving towards this kind of a different thing, improving upon it. This here is a revolutionary step in a completely different direction, and it tumbles up everything all around. No backlight, different requirements, different performance, different picture quality, everything is different. It is genuinely something that we have not seen commercially before. As such, it opens up a myriad of new possibilities, but it also limits existing habits. For example, placement, how to think about the placement of the monitor, organization of the room, etc., etc. It is a very exciting first of its kind, but every first of its kinds has issues and will be a kind of a learning experience for the company that is producing it and putting it out on the market. And SVD 32 reflective LCD computer monitor is not an exception to that rule. So I'm just kind of hoping that this will be a good learning experience for SunVision Display, and how to offer this technology to users in a more complete package, because right now the heart of this one, the reflective LCD panel, the technology here is absolutely astonishing and outstanding, but this panel, this monitor, actually lacks some of the well-established norms that a computer monitor should have, such as VESA standard, compatibility with multiple display ports, a functional mount, a USB hub, to mention just the basic few. Also, as it is a revolutionary piece of new technology, it does absolutely require a complete rethink of your working environment, because you have to allow, or you want to, if you have an expensive piece of technology like this, you want to get the best out of it, and in order to do that, you need to rethink of your office and room situation to give it the best possible lighting conditions. And that is not a bad thing, because that means that we no longer are forced to look for the darkest corner of the room or the office where to put your monitors to avoid the glare and to go like on the sunlight and all that kind of stuff. But actually you can embrace it. You can embrace the sunlight, you can embrace the daylight, and reorganize your stuff so that you are actually utilizing the sunlight. Something that's a completely different, it's a fundamental shift in thinking and approaching how to organize your office and workspace with your display in mind. And that is a good thing, because yes, while it takes away the darkest corners of the room off the table and limits them, it opens up everything else, right? And that's something that definitely has to be kept in mind. And for me, that's a really cool thing. The main question then is, should you buy it? Well, this is not an easy buy. There is absolutely no way that I can just say like, yeah, this is no brainer, just go ahead and buy it. First of all, the price is extremely prohibitive. Then it is limited, because it does have that set of requirements that you have to deliver so that you can get the maximum out of that panel. It is large, and the limitations of the technology can be prohibitive depending on your environmental conditions. But it also offers something that no other product on the market currently does, and what it does extremely well, unlike anything else on the market. Again, so if you are okay with the set of limitations and requirements that go along with this reflective LCD type of innovative technology, then great, because absolutely nothing on the market was able to do or can do what this monitor can do. That's the bottom line. The other question that I think would be only fair to answer is, would I personally buy it? And here I have a very complicated situation, because completely honestly, I am still thinking of asking SVD if there is a possibility of me buying out this unit that they sent out here as a review unit, because I absolutely love this thing. It's absolutely amazing. But there are two things that are holding me back from even asking that. So I'm just pondering that question in my head. I've been doing it for weeks now, and I can't reach a decision, and that's because of these two. First of all, the lack of light in this room, in my main room, and the complete impossibility of me to reorganize this workroom to actually allow and accommodate the needs of the screen is a very big problem. I can't reorganize the room to actually face it to the window, and if I just put it here, then it's the darkest part of the room. That's intentionally how I designed it, and that's not good for this screen, so therefore it's not going to perform good in this area, and then it's a waste. Like, why would I have it if I'm not utilizing the maximum out of it? The second problem is that it's a 32-inch, and that's a little bit too large for my needs. I have a dual screen setup. My main screen is a 4K 43-inch Dell screen, and that's not going to change because I need 4K and I need a lot of real estate here. But the secondary screen could have been replaced. My current one is 27-inch, but there's a 32-inch. Even if I had good lighting conditions, the 32-inch is still a little bit too big. If it was 27, then it would fit perfectly, but at 32, and the lack of VESA compatibility just makes it physically difficult to accommodate to the existing setup that I have. And as I already mentioned, my setup is absolutely zero flexibility to it. There's no way. I've made it, custom made it for these screens and for this room. I custom built this for this room, so therefore accommodating something larger and different is not so easy. So the dark conditions of the room and inflexibility of the room setup, those are the two main things that are preventing me from actually reaching out the decision. If I had a bigger room or I had more flexibility with the setup that I have in my room, then it would be an absolute no-brainer, and I would just write to them and say, hey, please, can I actually buy this one off and continue using it, because it is unlike anything else that I've ever used, and it's an amazing piece of technology. However, as it is now, I want it. I really do want it, and I really do want to be able to use it in my current setup, but unfortunately for me, that's my own loss, is that my current conditions would not use or utilize the maximum out of this piece of technology, and that's the problem that I have. That's why I'm kind of, what do I do? Hopefully it is possible that soon, relatively soon, I might actually have a bigger workspace, and then I'm thinking like, okay, so maybe I should, if there's a possibility to buy it off, could I actually maybe buy it and then keep it and wait until I move, because I don't know about the availability, what's going to happen, etc., etc. So those are my dilemmas, and honestly, I have no idea what to do. So I genuinely still don't know. Those are the things, the ball's in the air, and I'm just kind of thinking about these things at the moment. However, as it is, the SunVision Display 32-inch reflective LCD computer monitor. Is it a perfect product? Absolutely not. It has limitations that some of them were easily remediable and avoidable. It's expensive, and it's large, and it has a 1080p, and it has all of that. But at the heart of it, it is a reflective LCD panel, the first of its kind and the only of its commercially available kind currently. And as such, it offers things that no other product can compete with. And that is the difficult thing to stress out, just how different this is. And here's just one practical example that I want to share with you honestly. So for almost 4 weeks, I've been using it as my secondary screen here in the setup in the suboptimal conditions, but still I was able to use it because I was reviewing it and I was using it and all that kind of stuff. I've grown accustomed to it, and now 3 days ago I've moved it back and I'm back to my old setup, and already now I am feeling pressure and pain here, and here. And this is usual for me. This is something that I normally have. And sometimes you probably even notice that this eye is a little bit more closed than this one. And that's because I do have that kind of pain that is present here. However, during the weeks of using that screen, the reflective LCD SVD screen, I have not felt that it was actually gone in a matter of days after actually starting to use it. And that is priceless. So if you are suffering from some kind of medical and health related consequences of the flickering light, of the blue LEDs, of the glowing panels and things like that, that are prohibiting you from using these technologies or are making it painful and unpleasant, then there's really difficult, how do you put a price on that if there is a product that can actually help you not have that? And it is a very difficult thing to explain how it feels that you start using it and just your face relaxes, and it is unlike anything that you've felt before, because there wasn't anything like that before. CRT screens flickered, LCD screens flicker, LED screens flicker, OLED screens flicker, everything flickers. E-ink screens don't flicker as well, but they are utterly slow, they're equally expensive, and they are, monochromatic. So there's that too. So as far as I'm concerned, yes, it is an expensive device, but there's nothing like it. And what it does extremely well. It is well above my expectations. And what it offers to the world as a display technology, I think, is incredibly important. And the reflective LCD technology should be supported, and SVD should be applauded for their gutsiness to actually even attempt something as crazy as this, which is to build a panel like this and offer it for people to buy. It's a fantastically gutsy, slightly crazy move, but I love them for it because nobody else dares to even think about this. Yet, here it is. We have it right now. Something completely new. Expensive, flawed, yes, but essentially the only one of its kind, and what it does and what it's supposed to do, it delivers amazingly well. All right, I hope that now, first of all, I hope that you understand why this was one of the most difficult reviews that I've had to do, because the device and the technology is just simply completely different. But I also want to say again, thank you to Sun Vision Display for allowing me the opportunity to actually test this unit out, for supplying the test unit, for the reviewing and all that kind of stuff, and for being cool for extending the period of test time, because I thought it was really important to keep it for a longer period of time, to actually feel the difference and live with it for weeks, so that I can bring you an objective review of the technology and this display. I hope you liked the video, and if you did, please like and subscribe and ding the notification bell down below to get notified when new videos come out on My Deep Guide. I would also like to kind of hear what are your thoughts about this. Share your concerns, questions, what you like, what you dislike. It's helpful for everybody to actually know and to start thinking about these things, because it is an extremely pricey device. It is somewhat prohibitive because of the lighting conditions and things like that. So I think more information we actually have and share amongst each other, the better it will be for potential buyers to do this. And I think the potential buyers are extremely important, because SVD should be supported and applauded for daring to do something like this. More people actually adopt this technology, better the next iteration will be, and better chance we have at something so important as reflective LCD technology to become another mainstream option to choose from, to have regular displays, e-ink displays, and reflective LCD displays. If you want to be a part of community and you want to share your insights and thoughts and comments about this or other technologies, there's also a link down below for the My Deep Guide Discord channel that you can join and join the discussion and the community. It's actually a fun place to be at. And also check out the My Daily Organizer. That's a PDF organizer, hyperlinked organizer that I made for organizing your year, month, quarter, week, day, anything like that. And it's something that helps out a lot of people. Check out the videos down below. There's a link to the My Daily Organizer playlist.